The federal government needs to be responsible. You don't get to break things and then just leave without doing something about it.
So the Democrats are back at it again with their anti-ICE antics, and today we apparently have Governor Tim Walz now demanding reparations from the Trump administration for essentially traumatizing him and hurting his feelings by sending ICE agents into Minnesota. No, I'm not making this up. They are actually doing this, and it doesn't stop there, because simultaneously at the national level, today Senator Chuck Schumer is set to shut down funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which in other words means no more TSA, FEMA, and counterterrorism in some type of vain performative attempt to protest against ICE, which, by the way, he will not even be defunding because he doesn't have the power to do so. So in other words, what Schumer is engaging in here is an attempt to sacrifice and potentially even get Americans killed to prove a point. And then inevitably, if that does happen, they are, of course, going to blame the Trump administration and claim the blood is on their hands, when, of course, it is Democrats who caused, triggered, provoked, and incited this entire situation to begin with. But after all, maybe we shouldn't be so surprised, because are you beginning to notice a pattern here? Which is to say, maybe Chuck Schumer simply learned from the best, and that is, of course, from Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, who employed the same exact strategy as it pertained to the ICE operations there and all the supposed chaos triggered by the Trump administration. You know, here you have a guy who kept on encouraging his supporters to go out and commit violence in the streets and break the law and get in the faces and get in all these confrontations. And then when his voters did exactly what he encouraged them to do, they are, of course, now claiming it's the Trump administration that caused all of this. It's almost like these lunatics, these actual psychopaths, are saying, let's sacrifice people in order to make some type of political point against ICE. That's actually what they're doing, right? So please take notes of that, because you're going to hear a lot of talk about how, oh, everything happening here is the Trump administration's fault. You know, they cry out in pain as they strike you. You cannot keep setting up intentionally bad situations and then blaming someone else when you set up the situation. Obviously, the entire political nature of the left wing in the Democrat Party revolves around taking no accountability for one's actions. Tim Walz is a prime example of that. But still, nonetheless, we're going to call out these ridiculous performative antics, although maybe they're not so performative in today's video, because on one hand, as it pertains to Tim Walz, hey, you want reimbursement now from the federal government, buddy? Well, why should they reimburse you when you caused this entire situation to begin with, right? You want them to essentially give you a bailout for your own bad behavior? Not going to happen, buddy. And then secondly, same goes for Chuck Schumer, right? Anyways, let's get into all of it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, take a listen here as Tim Walz is now demanding the rest of the country, U.S. taxpayers, now foot the bill for the very damages that he caused to his own state, such as refusing to deploy the National Guard until it was way too late, refusing to use his local police to actually do crowd control and common sense safety measures. And apparently now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the rest of your fault. Hey, you watching it? Hey, you watching this video right now? Apparently, it is your fault that Tim Walz is a terrible governor who caused the entire situation on his streets. Take a listen.
The federal government needs to pay for what they broke here. There are going to be accountability on the things that happened, but one of the things is the incredible and immense costs that were borne by the people of this state. The federal government needs to be responsible. You don't get to break things and then just leave without doing something about it. So we're going to be asking the federal delegation to be investing and doing the things necessary.
You don't get to break things and then just leave. Coming from the very governor who, I will repeat this point because it is very important, caused this entire situation to begin with. It is Democrat politicians like himself that, first of all, encourage their voter base to go get themselves in dangerous, life-threatening situations. Then simultaneously, while inciting that violence, told his own police departments to stand down in the name of sanctuary city policies. And now it's all the fault of the federal government that the state government refused to enforce its own law. Pretty ironic. But then secondly, I would further point out that that is exactly what Tim Walz is currently doing with his political career. Are we not to forget You are the man who broke Minnesota. You are the very reason ICE went to Minnesota to begin with, because of the fact that you were enabling billions of dollars of fraud being stolen and embezzled out of the state. And what are you now doing now that it's been exposed and caught? Just leaving? Just resigning and looking to, no longer run for re-election. And on that point, by the way, Tim Walz, maybe we'll consider the idea of reparations when you consider paying out some own reparations from your own state for the billions of dollars that you defrauded, not just from your own taxpayers, but in many cases from federal taxpayers on top of that, right? Who stole here? Who broke something? As is the case all the time with this ICE situation, it's Democrats from the beginning. I repeat that again. It is Democrats who opened the border over the past 4 years. So you're going to sit there and cry about, oh, ICE, mass deportations, that's so bad. Why do we need mass deportations? How did a political candidate get elected off of that? Why is that now a popular policy with many Americans? It didn't happen by accident. You caused it. Now you're playing the victim. Same thing with ICE being in Minnesota. Oh, ICE is in Minnesota. That's so bad. Why is ICE in Minnesota, Tim Walz? Huh? Did they just come there by... You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about accountability. Did they just come there by accident? Or is it because you don't know how to govern, and repeatedly, we have to clean up the mess that the Democrat Party causes because they don't know how to govern on a very basic level, and then you call us the bad guys for cleaning up your freaking mess? And again, I'll say, as it pertains to the situations you saw on the street, same exact story. Who caused that? We've all established it, okay? So what a just utterly ridiculous proposition, but I would point out that this whole reparations idea apparently has gone mainstream with a lot of Democrats. Take a listen to the Minneapolis mayor expressing his support.
Governor Walz was talking about that as well, and he said he wants federal compensation because of what happened in Minnesota. Right. He said you don't get to break things and then just leave without doing something about it. Do you agree with that there should be federal compensation?
I do. To give you an idea of the damage that we have collectively experienced, this has indeed been catastrophic. Now, to be clear, we're not victims here. We are tough. We've got the kind of grit in Minneapolis that I think is admirable. We're going to make an extraordinary comeback. And of course, we have to acknowledge the impact on people, on children, on small and local businesses, on our economy.
You can't make that up. Oh yeah, now suddenly they're fiscal conservatives. Now, Minneapolis, Minnesota cares so much about draining taxpayer resources and finances. And hey, our budget, we can't handle it. Oh yeah, really? Yeah, you have shown such a great regard for all of those things. But I would point out that the tactics of Minnesota Democrats are not simply reserved to a couple of crazy lunatic politicians in one state. This reflects how the entire National Democrat Party feels, and that goes all the way to the idea of attempting to sacrifice Americans to prove a point about ICE. Which is why, of course, we now shift our attention to Chuck Schumer, who is set to shut down all funding for DHS tonight. Tonight, it will be the deadline. There's no extension. At the moment, it does not appear that a deal has been reached. And of course, what does shutting down DHS mean? Well, I'd first of all point out it doesn't actually mean defunding ICE, okay? So, of course, Democrats are going to get up there and pretend like that's what they're doing. It's not what they're doing. ICE is permanently funded by the big, beautiful bill. Rather, if you cut congressional funds for DHS, all you are doing, as we pointed out in the beginning, is defunding the TSA, FEMA. That's natural disasters, by the way. So if a natural disaster strikes, hey, Democrats are going to basically say, okay, Americans can freeze, Americans can drown, they can die, whatever. But you know what? Fighting against ICE deporting illegal alien criminals is more important, standing up and making a point for people who intentionally broke the law and provoked ICE and got themselves in dangerous situations. That's more important than the normal citizens who maybe are going to freeze in a snowstorm, right? So that's what they're saying. It also includes the Coast Guard, national security issues, counterterrorism, cybersecurity as well, right? So, you could just see cracks that cause a terrorist attack, and they're going to say, oh, whoa, we don't care about that. Because have you seen what ICE is doing in Minnesota? They're disappearing people, which is a lie, by the way. But, that's what these people are up to, right? And Chuck Schumer, despite, I repeat, not defunding ICE, but defunding FEMA and the TSA instead, is proudly celebrating this week, saying this is a shot across the bow to Republicans. Democrats will not support a blank check for chaos. Oh yeah, you're so noble for that, Chuck Schumer, You trying to Let me ask the serious question, Democrats. How many American citizens are you actually willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to get martyred to, push this whole anti-ICE cause? Because apparently the people in Minnesota were not enough. Apparently now, forget, those are your voters. Okay, that's part of your base. Now you just want to expand it to everyone, right? It's your moral responsibility to be in danger and potentially worse than danger. Because, Chuck Schumer over here, old Chucky and Tim Walz, they're not happy about ICE. This is ridiculous. It's just straight up evil. I don't know what else to say about it, but take a listen.
So as you all know, from day one I've said unless there are really strong, meaningful reforms to rein in ICE and stop the violence, there will not be Democratic votes to fund ICE and extend the awful status quo that now exists. Well, today Senate Democrats made that point absolutely clear. For weeks, we've been pushing common sense reforms, the very types of things that local police and sheriffs throughout America routinely follow. Today's strong vote was a shot across the bow to Republicans. Democrats will not support a blank check for chaos. This vote today asked a simple question. Will you rein in ICE's abuses, or will you vote to extend the chaos? Republicans chose chaos, and the Democrats, we refused. Republicans chose to put a bill on the floor that ignored the abuses, ignored the outrage, ignored what the American people want overwhelmingly.
Okay, again, you guys are just lying about this because you're making it sound like you're defunding ICE when you're not. And then secondly, arguing you're trying to end the chaos by, let me get this straight, shutting down the TSA and FEMA. That's going to end chaos in the United States, Chuck Schumer? It doesn't make any sense, but after all, it's not really supposed to, is it?
Hi, as a committed Democrat, I want the same changes that every other Democrat wants to make on ICE. But ICE already has $75 billion in funding from the big, beautiful bill that I did not vote for. So what it will impact is that we'll shut down important parts of DHS, whether that's FEMA, whether that's the Coast Guard, whether that is also about the CISA, the cyber security agency in our nation. All of these are shut down. We want to find a way forward to produce those changes, but shutting the government down is the wrong way.
Yeah, so Chuck Schumer, is that what Americans, according to you, support? They support you shutting down FEMA and the TSA in order to protest something about ICE, but not actually defund ICE? I think the answer there is very clearly no. And a big reason why it's so difficult to negotiate with these people is because at the end of the day, what they are fundamentally doing, I want to point this out as well, what the Democrat Party is fundamentally doing is harboring, protecting, and defending terrorists. And you might notice a pattern. It's kind of very central, I guess, to their party politics. On one hand, that is exactly what is happening in the streets. Every single time that left-wing mobs try to get in the way and stop ICE from arresting a criminal illegal alien, oftentimes these are very bad hombres with very bad records. Liberals don't care. They say, keep them in our community. Get out. You're a Nazi. How dare you remove this child sex predator? That's exactly what they're doing. Secondly, they're defunding Homeland Security, right? Mainly a counterterrorism agency at its core, and does some other important stuff too, by the way, for the sake of, apparently, according to them, stopping the chaos, right? It doesn't even make any sense. And then thirdly, I would lastly like to point out here that Chuck Schumer's demands, right, what he's claiming, oh, if Republicans would just agree to this, then we can fund Homeland Security, and they're very common sense compromise measures, are actually, at their core, designed to keep on defending and actually empowering the very domestic terrorists in our streets. And the reason I say that, well, let's explain that to you. So what is Chuck Schumer, to summarize it all, currently demanding? Oh, Democrats are not going to vote to fund DHS unless you do this. Well, we have, first and foremost, they want to change immigration law so that DHS officers can no longer enter private property without a judicial warrant. You keep on hearing this all the time. Judicial warrant, except here's the thing. Historically, including under the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, and as far back as most people can remember, because immigration is a civil matter primarily, yes, overwhelmingly in history, immigration agents have been able to get by on administrative warrants. That is legal. That has been perfectly normal. Democrats trying to weaponize the ignorance of the American populace are just trying to now scream this garbage about judicial warrant, even though that's not necessary. It actually has never been necessary. No, it's not a violation of your due process. Again, immigration is a civil matter. Now, if you would like to make immigration a criminal matter, frankly, Democrats, given the current state of our country, then, perhaps I'd be on board with that. But it is a civil matter. That's why it's always been an administrative warrant. What are they really trying to do with this? Well, they're trying to set up a situation where woke judges, I suppose, like James Boasberg and Hannah Dugan, can get in the way and say, no, I'm not going to approve that judicial warrant. And just basically, what's the overall agenda here? Slow down the deportations. Because after 4 years of opening the border and refusing to slow down the mass migration, now, of course, let's do everything we can to really, at its core, right, obstruct Republicans when they're trying to reverse the very bad damage we did to this country. So that's, the judicial warrant explanation. But beyond that, you'll notice most of it has to do with ICE agents no longer being able to protect themselves from left-wing domestic terrorists. They are, of course, demanding that ICE remove their masks and face coverings. Now, you'll notice Chuck Schumer has no solution, has no proposal as it pertains to the terrorists who are stalking them, showing up to the houses of their families, threatening their families. But of course, right, what is this all about? Democrats seek to empower and enable the domestic terrorists that they ultimately support. It goes on and on here. You'll notice as well, they apparently now want to ban ICE officers from wearing any paramilitary style gear. In other words, what? Let's also not have gear that can protect ourselves from the lunatics out in the streets. And of course, last point I'd like to make, because you heard this a lot, is this whole thing over the roving patrols, right? They're basically trying to make it so that ICE can only do targeted operations now. They're trying to ban Border Patrol from, in any context, kind of doing these things where they're like, hey, immigration status, can I see papers? And what's really going on there as well, right? They want to make it basically impossible to detain illegal aliens. And by the way, make it so that illegal aliens don't actually have to live in fear of deportation. That's what they're fundamentally doing there, right? The reason I support at the very least roving patrols being a legal possibility that can sometimes happen is why? Because you can't have illegals coming into this country thinking, oh, well, unless I get a judicial warrant against me for whatever reason, I'm perfectly fine. You have a free pass to illegally immigrate into this country. And then you think the border that's been so quiet as of late is going to keep on being so quiet if Democrats have their way? No. Because what that actually does is it's a soft form of amnesty, right? If there's no longer essentially a real threat of deportation besides people who commit serious crimes, then yes, guess what's going to happen? A bunch of people are going to illegally immigrate into this country, but after all, I suppose that's actually the point. I suppose that's what they're trying to achieve, right? That's been the agenda this entire time. They don't want it to stop, and there it goes. So, just an explanation I would like to make as to why Chuck Schumer's demands are frankly ridiculous. I have no idea how this is going to end. It is, after all, election year. I could very much see the Senate Republicans, for the sake of maybe trying to play politics, they're like, okay, let's come to the table, let's negotiate or something, as if, these Democrats have ever wanted to have a real reasonable negotiation about anything. I'm just going to say, I know we say this all the time, but the option still remains. You could just terminate the filibuster. You could just stop these people, right? Because it's a well-known fact. They are doing what they're doing on immigration to ensure a permanent political majority, which means what, Republicans? They want you to never be able to win again. So I'll say this again. If you guys have any sense of self-preservation as a political party, right? If you guys, we're not even talking about the base. We're not talking about conservative demands. If you're going to be selfish, if you're going to be cynical, then be selfish and cynical, okay? That needs to come with the understanding, stopping their immigration agenda and mass migration agenda is that fundamentally important. We cannot play games. We cannot negotiate with a terrorist, just straight up, But we'll see what happens. I don't know if I exactly have high hopes for that. But all of that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this entire situation in the comment section down below. How do you think Senate Republicans should respond? What do you think of Tim Walz's demands? Let me know. Be sure to leave a like on this video, guys. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.